Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Thomas. Northern California is known for its influential music, tech innovation, and of course, its wine. Next is a collection of stories highlighting some of the vineyards and attractions in Northern California's wine country.
On a 15-acre vineyard in Lodi, 120 years of tradition is in bloom. While this plot of land hasn't always been Makami Vineyards, it's always been grapes.
For me, it's really about honoring a tradition.
Third-generation Japanese-American Jason Makami is continuing the legacy of his grandfather, Teruchi Makami, who immigrated from Japan to Lodi in 1896 at 13 years old.
So Makami actually is composed of two Japanese characters. The first syllable, mi, means three, and kami, in this case, means up.
Farming grapes in the areas we know today as Acampo, Woodbridge, Stockton until 1942. After the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor military base in Hawaii, Japanese Americans on the West Coast were forced into internment camps.
The Japanese Americans all had to effectively give up whatever property they owned to be incarcerated in these camps. And in my father's case, my father and grandfather, they were moved from Lodi to Rower, Arkansas.
This is his father, Jim, at the Rower, Arkansas internment camp in 1942 to 1945. His mother, at the time facing another first in U.S. history. She was living in Hiroshima, Japan. Its name many know because it was the city where America dropped its first atomic bomb.
And so unfortunately, she was an atomic bomb survivor. She had a brother who passed away immediately during the atomic bomb. He was effectively evaporated when the bomb dropped. And then my mom also suffered burn injuries.
As we walk the vineyard, Jason recounts the terrible history that had so much impact on his family. When the Makamis returned from the internment camp to Lodi, things were not the same.
Because of various laws at the time, they did not own that property. So they were effectively renting out property.
Returning to Lodi with just a train ticket in their hands and whatever they could carry, the Makami men returned to the only work they've ever known, growing grapes.
Whether you call it the immigrant spirit or you call it, the American way, my grandfather and father, they just continue to work as workers, as farm workers. They worked different properties and eventually saved enough to purchase the initial property in the 50s.
In the 1950s, the Makamis were finally able to purchase land in Lodi. In 1963, they expanded to where Jason stands today as a result of his father's hard work, 15 acres in Lodi off West Sargent Road.
There's a phrase in Japanese or Japanese American, it's called shikata ga nai or shoganai. It basically means you have to sort of bear with it.
After his father's passing, Jason took Makami on a new path. In 2005, they began making wine.
My mom always instilled in me that, this is our family land, and so, don't think about selling it.
He says it's important to honor traditions so many in his generation have abandoned.
There were a lot of Japanese American families farming in this area, but my generation, post-college, tended to move either to the Bay Area or other locations and to move out of farming.
Winemaking is not an industry many minorities have ventured into. Even Jason admits it was a risk, but one he wanted to take.
To be able to see other folks trying to honor their legacies or honor their history is really nice to see.
But Jason feels the Makami story speaks to the immigration policies and inequities polarizing our country today.
From a Japanese American perspective, a lot of times what I think about is it's unfortunate that with the immigration policies these days, there's a lot of negative connotations associated with Mexican Americans, etc. And, their story today is no different than my father's story, 50 years ago, in terms of whether it be either forms of racism or having stereotypes put upon you. And so it's really important for us to not relive that history of treating Mexican Americans the way the Japanese Americans were during World War II. Same thing for the Muslim Americans as well.
For Makami, keeping his family story alive is very important.
To think about what my grandfather had to do to come as a 13-year-old or 14-year-old boy to the United States back in 1896, to what my father had to endure during World War II, and now being able to actually carry on their tradition of grape growing and now producing wines.
What keeps him going today and doing this hard work is his family.
I think they would be very proud. They would be very happy that I'm continuing to still own and operate the property and try and produce something under our family name.
A story that spans 120 years and 3 generations of wine growing.
It really means a lot to be able to pass that along to my daughter.
This stunning vineyard view is just an hour-and-a-half drive from downtown Sacramento in Fairplay in El Dorado County. Dina Santos and John Avila have been married for 21 years, and with a lot of hard work, the couple is living their dream of owning a vineyard.
There's very few Latinos that own vineyards and that have, their own wine. So we're proud of what we've done.
They had been yearning for a weekend escape from the stress of their day-to-day lives, so they bought this 45-acre property in 2008 and got to work planting.
Vino de Oro means wine of gold in Spanish, and our property here in El Dorado County, Fairplay appellation, is actually an old gold mine.
They mainly grow Spanish varietal grapes.
So my dad is Mexican and my mom is Spanish, so, hence the Spanish varietals. This is who we are.
The couple says their wine pairs really well with Spanish dishes.
Oh yeah, the Tempranillo goes really nice with spicy foods.
The Malbec, again, good with big, like heavy moles and carne asadas, things like that.
It's a labor of love, bringing the couple back to their roots. Dina grew up in Arizona, working the fields with her dad.
You work so hard to get educated because you want a better life, you want more opportunities, and then you find that you actually really did love some of your past and love the land. And so, I feel like for me, I've come full circle.
Susie Vasquez spends most of her time surrounded by wine.
As a kid, I never dreamed of being a winemaker. It's just life took me there, and I'm so thankful.
She's the senior winemaker at Lane Twins Family Winery and Vineyards in San Joaquin County.
And I just fell in love with the process, the transformations to the grapes, all the way to the wine.
Susie moved to California from Bolivia at the age of 24 and credits family for her success.
I grew up with example of hard work. I was able to put in place these values and this heritage for my family and work through achieving the goal to become a winemaker.
She says more diversity is needed in the wine industry.
I would love to see more Latinas, more female Latinas in the wine industry as winemakers, as director of winemakers, as presidents of winemaking. It's a wonderful industry, and I see the more and more interest that the Latinos are having.
Melissa Sanchez wants to advance representation too.
The more representation you have, the more perspectives you have.
That's why she organizes events like this one to bring Latinas and others together in Sacramento for the love of wine.
People from all over the world come here, so I thought it would be really great to be able to sort of showcase that, Latinos in wine. Of course, we are the backbone of the wine industry here in California, but we don't get a lot of coverage of that.
We're usually not visible across a lot of different genres of industries, let alone wine, which is already a heavily male-dominated industry.
Gabriela Fernandez with the nonprofit Hispanics in Wine explains the importance of representation on all levels.
Having Latinas in positions of power, like high leadership positions of power, allows you to not only create effective change, but also allows you to set the tone for the team, the culture that you're building.
But she says breaking barriers can be challenging.
A lot of times you're boxed into being a vineyard steward, somebody who's out in the fields. We're kind of boxed into a monolith.
So it will be wonderful to see in the future, all these doors that will open from the next generations that are coming. So as Latinas right now, fighting these spaces, right, and embracing these challenges, what we're doing is opening these doors for the next generations coming in and taking over.
Before the internal combustion engine and before electric motors were widely in use, it was the water wheel that powered many early machines.
They were the movers of industry, let's say.
Standing at 36 feet tall and turning at a speed of about 6 revolutions per minute is California's oldest working water-powered grist mill.
Well, a grist mill is a mill that was used to grind grain into flour.
Rob Grossi is one of the many caretakers at the Bale Grist Mill State Historic Park in Calistoga. His official title is Historic Millwright, a title that few people in the world hold, and for good reason.
What I've been into since I was a kid, really. But there's not enough money to be made really doing it, so I've always done other jobs for full time. It's been kind of a part-time passion of mine.
It's Rob's job to keep the wooden water wheel and all of its moving parts, well, moving. And it's not an easy task. The historic mill was built in 1846 by a mysterious man by the name of Dr. Edgar Turner Bale.
They really didn't know a lot about him. I mean, there wasn't a lot written about him.
The mysteriousness is the fact that we don't know a whole lot about him.
Yeah, and he died young, too.
What we do know is that Dr. Bale was an English army doctor hired by General Vallejo before California became a state.
He ended up marrying General Vallejo's niece, and consequently he became a Mexican citizen and he got a land grant.
Shortly after Bale got that Mexican land grant and had the grist mill built, the gold rush started and Bale got gold fever.
But he actually went to the gold fields and he came back sick and died.
It was Bale's wife that ended up running the mill after he died in 1849. Then in 1925, the mill became a historic landmark. Since then, the mill's been repaired and restored a number of times, so tourists like me can be put to work grinding grain like it was done in the old days.
There you go. There you go.
That feels just like moving a rock, essentially. Grist is just another word for grain, and the small hand-crank grist mill gives you an idea of how hard it was to get enough flour to make bread.
The shelf life of flour can be years and years. They only had months. So that's why they came to the mill as often as they did, and they had to grind their grain typically every few months.
Today, we know Napa Valley as wine country, but during the gold rush era, this was the breadbasket of California.
And we had the gold rush, there was a lot of mouths to feed. So the price of flour went way up.
Whoa, this is coming out so much faster. The giant thinly spaced rock grinders make quick work of turning the hard grain into powder. It's a very dusty business in here.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You have flour boogers all the time.
Yep.
Here, gravity is the workhorse, and it's pretty powerful. The weight of the water turns the wheels, which power the belts, spin the wooden gears, and create a lot of flour.
When these were working commercially, they could produce upwards of 900 pounds an hour.
And watching the wooden mill in work is like stepping back in time. From the Bale Grist Mill in Calistoga, I'm John Bartell. Hope to see you on the back roads. It's gonna be a long time before I get enough flour to make some bread here. A good glass of wine can bring people together. It can spark conversation. And in 1972, it forged a new relationship between China and the United States.
The Chinese people are a great people.
President Nixon went to China for the first time in 1972, and he brought a bottle of Napa Valley along for his trip.
In what is now known as the Toast to Peace, President Nixon and Premier Zhou Enlai drank a glass of sparkling Napa Valley wine. The Schremsberg Blanc de Blanc led to the first diplomatic conversations in 25 years and inspired China to start making wine of their own.
National Light Industry created this wine research group and chose my grandfather to be the leader of this group, and he learned winemaking in France.
Grape wine in China had never been made before on a large scale, so Premier Zhou enlisted the help of Xin's grandfather, Shen Jidian.
And he's the first red wine winemaker in China, and produced the first bottle of red wine in back to 1970s.
Thanks to the work Xin's grandfather did in the 1970s, winemaking has become a multi-billion-dollar industry in China. His palate shaped the way that wine tastes in his country. Now, Xin is working to introduce the Chinese palate to Napa under her label called 70s Love.
My grandfather is at 70s, so I named my wine 70s Love.
Since Xin was a little girl, she had been following in her grandfather's footsteps.
And instead of going to kindergarten, my job is to stay in the cave, lifting the bones from the barrels.
In college, she went to UC Davis to learn about the science behind Western winemaking.
A good winemaker is a scientific artist. So a big part of our job is scientist, and a big part of our job is artist.
For Xin, the science and art are blended together by using both her Chinese and American palate. She says her wine pairs well with the spicy plant-based Chinese diet and the fatty meat-heavy American diets.
Because I'm making wine here in Napa Valley, so I'm not making a Chinese-style wine. I'm still making wines that are reflecting Napa.
Yes, Xin's wine is a Napa wine, but it has a Chinese influence, an influence that is not new to the Napa and Sonoma County region.
A part of Napa winemaking history has Chinese involved in the very early and the beginning stage.
Following California's gold rush, Chinese laborers planted many of the early vineyards and dug many of the early wine caves. Ultimately, most of those laborers were pushed out during the Chinese Exclusion Act in the 1880s, but Xin says more than a century later, Chinese students are getting back into the California wine industry.
I graduated from UC Davis, and I can see more and more Chinese students come to UC Davis, study winemaking and viticulture and enology, and I'm happy to see more faces from Asian countries.
As it did in 1972, wine helped open a dialogue between two nations. Today, Xin hopes her wine can do the same.
How to say this? I want to build a bridge between the two countries.
From the vineyards of St. Helena, I'm John Bartel. Seven times a day, the echoes of monastic chants bounce off the walls at the New Clairvaux Abbey. These harmonic hymns are sung by Cistercian monks, a French Roman Catholic order dating back to the year AD 1098. The Cistercian way of life is strongly cenobitic, which means each monk searches for God individually. Brethren here don't hold services, they don't teach or do parish work. They just seek God and do work. And historically, work for these monks means making wine.
They were making wines that were regarded as the best in the world in the 12th and 13th century, reserved for kings and popes.
There's only about 15 Cistercian monasteries in the United States. One of them is at the southeastern edge of Tehama County in the little railroad town of Vina, California.
And around the railroad, they saw that there were vines, so they named the town Vina.
Brother Luis Cortez says the vineyard's rich history predates him by more than a century. Some of the first vines were planted by California trailblazer Peter Lassen, and then later developed by former governor and railroad baron Leland Stanford.
He had 4,000 acres here at the Great Vina Ranch, and that was the largest vineyard in the entire world. So we have a very important role in the history of viticulture in the United States, you might say in the world.
Today, the vineyard is much smaller, but they still grow grapes fit for nobles.
So this here is our Tempranillo. This is the noble grape from Spain. And something that a lot of people don't know is that this grape, Tempranillo, made its American debut here at Vina during the Stanford era.
The Cistercian monks took over a small portion of the Vina property in 1955. Among the original group was Father Thomas Davis, who was a monk sent over from a monastery in Kentucky.
Each person believes that God has called him or her to this way of life.
At first, the monks grew prunes and milked cows, but Father Thomas eventually helped turn the property back into a vineyard.
Can't go wrong. Can't go wrong with a good glass of wine from the monastery.
Everyone loves a good glass of wine.
The monks pick and process the grapes, but winemaker Amy Sunseri brings out the taste, and her blends have won multiple awards.
Oh, yeah, it goes down very well.
Sure, the grapes that go into the award-winning wine do have a lot of historic significance, but nowhere near the historic significance of the 800-year-old hand-chiseled stones that make up the New Clairvaux Abbey. Each one was removed from a Gothic-style Cistercian monastery in Spain, only to end up in California after an odd turn of events.
William Randolph Hearst brought over parts of this monastery.
Originally, the stones were destined to be a part of media mogul Randolph Hearst's mansion in Wintun, California. He spent millions of dollars to deconstruct the monastery in Spain and then ship them to the U.S.
And due to various circumstances, especially the Depression, he was unable to follow through on his plans.
This is kind of the grand reveal. I like doing this part here.
The dismantled monastery sat in a San Francisco warehouse long after Hearst's death. Father Thomas spent more than 40 years petitioning to get the stones delivered to Vina, and then in 1994, they were.
This looks like a very confusing puzzle.
Exactly. You might say it's a mix of 4 different buildings. Originally, there were 10,000 stones that William Randolph Hearst purchased and had shipped over to the United States.
Reconstructing the monastery became Father Thomas's life work. With nothing more than some old pictures and a lot of prayers, he and a staff of builders pieced together one of the 4 buildings.
Over 25 years to complete one of the buildings. We're going to rest a little bit.
Today, that building is enjoyed by the monks and anyone who wants to attend any one of the 7 daily prayers.
Has perfect acoustics. Excellent.
From the vineyards of the New Clairvaux Abbey, I'm John Bartel. Hope to see you on the Backroads.
Have you ever wondered what it's like to sleep inside a real rail car? Well, head over to Yountville and you'll find out. John Bartel here, making a little pit stop at the Napa Valley Railway Inn.
In the heart of Napa County's wine country sits a sleepy little train depot that boards a lot of passengers but doesn't move them anywhere.
What happened? Did a train break down on this thing and someone just built an inn here?
Not quite.
The rail cars and cabooses do sit on Napa Valley's historic railroad tracks, but owner/engineer of the inn, Lori Jones, says that the rail cars themselves weren't pulled here by a train, but rather placed here by a helicopter.
They were brought in from Oregon. A lot of them are from Southern Pacific Railroad Company, and they had to airlift some of them actually onto the track.
Inside the luxurious sleeper cars and cabooses, you'll find modern amenities like air conditioning and bathrooms, but when they were put here in the 1970s, they had a much more rustic feel. This room was actually an old cattle car.
So for being an old cattle car, this smells pretty good in here.
Yeah, I try my best to take out that smell from 150 years ago. But
There's 8 rooms in total at the Railway Inn, each one with their own history, but the most popular room is the caboose because the old observation windows in the ceiling offer up a great view.
and if they look out that window, the hot air balloons launch right behind us, and so, you know, 6 o'clock in the morning, but still, when do you get to see a hot air balloon flying?
The nice thing about a stationary sleeping car is that you don't have to worry about missing your train.
And we're not gonna have to worry about these things rolling away during the middle of the night or anything?
No, not at all. They're all locked in.
Got the brakes set on them,
Yep,
I guess.
absolutely.
And that's good because the Railway Inn is centrally located in Yountville, within walking distance of a number of popular restaurants and shops.
From the Napa Valley Railway Inn in Yountville, I'm John Bartel. Hope to see you on the Backroads.
you follow the Russian River through Sonoma County, the sound of clinking glasses gets louder as you approach the town of Corbell. This is the Corbell Bottling Factory, the oldest and largest champagne production facility in California.
We did 18,000 cases the other day.
Since 1882, Corbell's California champagne has been at some of the most iconic celebrations in American history, including every inauguration since Ronald Reagan. But that iconic bottle pop of Corbell's all started with the pop of a gun supposedly fired off in the air by Francis Corbell at a protest in Prague.
He was thrown in jail. The Habsburg guards pounced him and threw him in jail.
Corbell winery tour guide Hillary Reddy says that jail sentence might have been the end of Francis Corbell's story, had it not been for his grandmother.
His grandmother broke him out of prison by smuggling his clothes in under her hoop skirt.
Once clothed, Francis apparently lit a cigar and walked out disguised as a commoner. Shortly after that, he and his brothers fled to California to strike it rich in the gold rush.
They missed the gold rush, so they came up here and bought this property.
The area that she's talking about is the Russian River Valley in Sonoma County. The Corbell brothers made it rich by cutting down redwood trees for cigar boxes. They invested a lot of that money into a number of businesses, one being a champagne production.
We were the first ones in America to make champagne.
The word champagne is only reserved for wine made in the Champagne region of France, but because the Corbells hired a Champagne region winemaker and they won a series of lawsuits, they were allowed to call their sparkling wine California Champagne. Even during Prohibition, the Corbells continued to make champagne. The winemakers were so bold, they even sent a bottle to President Roosevelt.
2 months later to the day, he toasted the end of Prohibition with the Corbell Sec in front of the world under a sign that said Corbell Sec.
Now, Corbell wouldn't be one of the nation's largest winemakers had it not been for innovation. You see, champagne is difficult to make because the bottles must be rotated every day, but when the Heck family bought the Corbell Company in the 1950s, they started inventing ways to rotate the bottles and mass-produce Corbell's champagne.
This is what Adolf Heck invented, the automatic riddling rack in 1970, and it really did change the industry.
Hollywood discovered the Corbell winery in the late 60s while filming the World War II themed TV show Combat, starring Vic Morrow. TV producers persuaded Corbell to allow the combat scenes to be filmed on the property by promising to blow up and remove old stumps in the vineyard.
They blew out over 1,000 stumps in 6 months.
Well, whether you're celebrating the end of a war, a new year, or a presidential inauguration, Corbell put California on the map for premier champagne production.
Now, is it proper? Should I hold my pinky out? Is that what I should do?
Only if you're feeling very presidential.
I am feeling presidential today. From California's oldest champagne cellar, Corbell in Guerneville, I'm John Bartell. Hope to see you on the back roads.
Thanks for watching this ABC 10 Plus collection highlighting Northern California's wine country. Don't forget, we have more features just like this on the ABC 10 Plus app. You can also find the latest news and headlines and stay up to date on weather conditions. Thanks again for watching. I'm Chris Thomas. We'll see you next time.